Let's rant. The PlayStation 4 controller. It's been a couple of years since it launched with the PlayStation 4, and we've had plenty of time to find out the pros and cons of this particular controller. And before we get onto the positives, because there aren't that many to get onto, but we'll go through the negatives. One that are common between many of players, especially the wiggly and eventually breaky chargy port. The micro USB port with the new controller, with the PS4 controller, is just, within a couple of months you get the wiggle where it just loosens up, and it reminds me very much of when I was a young raccoon and your teeth start to wobble and come out when you lose your child teeth and then your adult ones come through. That very much reminds me of that. And then eventually it does stop charging. It will only start charging in specific areas, like if you touch the joypad or you wiggle it tiniest bit, it'll stop charging, and eventually it will, like I said, stop charging altogether. And at that point, which I had to do, I had to go and buy myself a replacement charging port and replace it myself. Which wasn't the hardest job in the world, considering how many repair jobs I've had to do to consoles in the past, especially the PS4 itself. This wasn't that tricky a job, it's really quite easy to do. It's just quite frustrating getting it open. If it's never been opened before, the controller, it can be very not willing, is probably the easiest way to describe it, of coming apart. They're quite annoyingly put together. It's quite fiddly to close it again because of the way the wires tuck in, but it is worth doing. It's quite a cheap fix. It's certainly better than paying whatever they list the price for the controller as brand new, which I'm guessing is still around £60. This is what it used to be listed as, and I certainly wasn't going to pay that again to get another joypad. And just before I forget, when it comes to that charger port, one of the biggest problems, this is to do with the short battery life as well, it's just an ever-ending circle that just feeds into each other and makes this situation so much worse, is that because the battery is so shit and you have to charge it constantly every couple of hours, you practically end up just leaving it plugged in all the time. But because the wire's so short, for example on the stock charging cable, it barely reaches anywhere and you just end up knocking the joypad over, and when you do, that just loosens up that charging port even more. So really, from what I can tell, because I've already gone through one board already, as I've mentioned, and I'm going to have to need another one soon because this one's wiggly as a motherfucker. So, yeah. Other little problems. The actual battery itself. Now there are problems which we're going to get onto that cause this issue, but if you remember the old PlayStation 3 controller, that used to last for days. Literally you could charge it up fully and then just leave it for days, for literally 3 or 4 days, and still play for hours every day. It's not like you're just using it. If you used it a little bit, I'm guessing you could go a whole week before having to even recharge it. And now with this PS4 controller, we're looking at 3 to 4 hours at best if you've got a decent battery. If it's a dodgy one, then you're probably less than that. So that's joyous. And what really causes that problem is the feature that everyone's really been annoyed at since it came out, is the light at the back. They only ever released a feature on the console to turn down the brightness of the light rather than deactivating it altogether, which is still annoying to this day, because we all know that's one of the causes of that battery just draining so fast. And really, to help that such a tiny lifespan of the battery, it would be nice to have that off, just so you get that little extra life. But no, sadly not. And finally, for the negatives, the frustrating touchpad. It's massive. Most games these days, it's just used as one extra button, so like maybe tap it to bring up the map, for example. So that was well worth the innovation there, Sony, well done. Originally when the console came out, it was used for little side things, comedic things, or just non-important things, such as turning a page on some part of the game, some little information booklet or something, you have to flick through the pages, you swipe left and right, or it's really not worth it. It's not really been utilised. But here's what I have my little conspiracy theory about the whole touchpad, is that they brought the touchpad in onto this new controller just basically to prevent third parties bringing out their own, aftermarket joypads for the PS4. Because the PS3 had plenty of aftermarket joypads for you to go out and buy. And on the PS4 there was really none of it until recently. It was only finally like 3 or 4 years in that they've actually maybe 5 years, that they've finally brought out aftermarket versions, but I think they're under license still from Sony. So that looks, from what I can tell, is what they did to clamp down on the whole aftermarket scene. So that's kind of shitty, really. That's not really consumer friendly, and considering that the feature isn't really used well in most PS4 games anyway, so really, in argument's sake, you should just ditch the touchpad and, you know, would be fine with that, and don't go replacing it with anything else like a HD quality colour screen, because that'll just sap the battery life even more. Now, we're just going to quickly go over a few positives so it's not just all negative, so I'm not seen as just a complete cynical arsehole. It is one of the nicest joypads to use, mainly because I think a lot of games this generation have focused a lot on doing joypad inputs, the controller inputs, making sure they're flexible, making sure they've got a lot of different setting options, which has made the whole experience a lot nicer. There are still issues with the controller schemes, and just for example, the whole issue with the toggles not being very reliable on the initial batch of PS4 controllers many years ago, but that's all long forgotten. And the triggers at the back, the L2 and R2, are fantastic. So much more control, especially if you like playing racing games, stuff like that. So much more precision. It's lovely. And apart from that, it's a classic old PlayStation layout, and I like it. The only things it could still do with is, like I said, remove that light, or at least allow us to switch it off, give us a proper battery, or one that lasts a lot longer, take away that touchpad, and maybe put a fan in, because some games are very intensive and it would be nice to have a cooled joypad. You know, if you're going to block out the aftermarket scene and stop other companies providing different versions of a joypad, then you're going to have to start doing it yourself, Sony. It's a trade-off you're going to have to be willing to do. If you're going to clamp down this area of the market, you've got to bring what you're now denying, because it's very frustrating. That joypad does get slippy when you spend a couple of laps around the track or you're playing some very intense game. It's a shame. Sony, you're making so many slip-ups and mistakes over the last couple of years, especially in this generation, and it'd be nice if you can just turn the cheek, you know, because now really Xbox has the consumer positive sort of badge at the moment. And on the start of the PS4 when it launched, this had the badge, and it was, yes, this is the one you want to go to, we're being friendly. At the time Xbox was trying to do online only and a lot of other scumbaggery, and now the tables are sort of turned. Xbox is sort of getting that side of the consumer market, and Sony's losing it. Personally, I'm moving on to PC, but I've still got my PS4 because at the end of the day, I bought it brand new, and that's an investment that I'm willing to keep. I've already repaired a couple of things on it, but I'll maybe cover that in a different video. There are so many issues with this generation, both hardware and with the actual games available. That was a Let's Rant that I feel was long coming. Sony, sort it out. You did so good with the design of it, and then you just messed up so many of the features, and you've got one of the main ones, you know, the fact that you have to have it plugged in and be attached to it. What's the point of having a wireless joypad if you have to have it plugged in all the time to charge it? Just basic logic, but you know. Logic is rare apparently. I'll see you in the next video. For now, goodbye.